Samir, let me welcome you to our series on Next Story. Here we are focused on personal next. And I was very fascinated with your background. You started in the finance field, then you went to media and headed a very, very important company, a multinational company. Now you're an entrepreneur and that too very focused in select segment where you have set up Qyuki, right? Keen to learn how did you go about this transforming yourself? What has motivated you? What has guided you in this journey of self transformation and sustained success?
Well, thank you for that. I'd like to think that I'm still on the journey of getting to that success, but it's been a fun ride so far, and I think some of the DNA was set up. I think we tend to forget how our upbringing or our growing years impact our decision making in sort of a subliminal way going forward. So I come from a fairly, I think, interesting background. My four grandparents are from different parts of the country. So I'm a fourth Punjabi, a fourth Maratha, a fourth Kannadiga, and a fourth Malayali.
Wow.
And I'm married to a half Sindhi and half Maharashtrian. So our kids are even more sort of nationally integrated or dispersed, however you want to take it. And I think that has definitely had some impact on the way we were brought up, this entire sort of cultural integration. The second thing was I also grew up in my dad is a retired admiral. So growing up in the services is a somewhat different kind of upbringing as you go through your early years and teens. And I think in that process, growing up in a house where dad fought the war in '71, he's a gallantry award winner. There are things that you grow up with that are somewhat different from non-service life. And then we spent 3 years in Pakistan, just in my formative years. And this is, remember, from being the son of a father who fought a war, and then we go to the country that the war was fought with. So there were very interesting dichotomies in all of this that sort of led to this, I guess, the ability to adjust quickly to changing situations. Because again, in the services, you move schools. I changed 9, 10 schools. And you don't realize this as you're going through life, but it gives you the mental fortitude to adapt to a situation very quickly, to not have a bias. I still have friends from back in school in Pakistan. Thanks to Facebook, we've reconnected after 10 years. And much like, Pakistanis and Indians could be friends outside India, but when you're India and Pakistan, you're sworn enemies. So so a lot of these things I think helped in the ability for swimming against the tide and somewhat risk-taking. So I went from being a VC to a banker. Typically, people go from banking to being a venture capitalist. I went reverse. And then from there, I went to being, running a gaming company, which was part of my life as a venture capitalist. And so I came back to actually execute on the vision that I'd written for the company as a banker. And so that kept happening. And then after all of this, I'm now running a media company with Shekhar Kapoor and A.R. Rahman, which is completely different from anything I've done. So my wife just sits back and says, what's in your head that makes you go do these funny things? But I don't think I'm necessarily thinking through each one. A lot of it is on gut. And I think it has to do with the way I just grew up.
So, you're giving credit to your upbringing and the environment in which you have grown up. What motivates you to change? I mean, what are you chasing as you move from one to the other, from VC to bank to media, gaming, and everywhere? If people go and check your track record, they'll find you have done a fabulous job. So it's not as if it is not successful. So what keeps you going? What's that? What are you chasing?
I think if I were to break it down, I wanted to, as a VC, I felt that once you put in the money, as much as you may want to be involved in running the business, you're somewhat disengaged and speaking from and I was a kid when I was at the firm, right? So, but I had the experience of doing 3 deals in those 2 years that I spent in a venture capital fund, ILFS Venture Corp. And then as a banker, I thought I'd be a little bit more engaged in defining. So I was raising money and helping companies only early stage and only internet tech companies, IT services companies, BPO companies. I became the de facto BPO guy at Ernst & Young back in the day. And so that was the time when ITS was sort of the hottest segment, 2000 to 2005, 6, 7. So, but again, as a banker, I felt that I was not walking the talk. I actually helped redesign India Games strategy at that point in time, which is what the connect was eventually, to move to India Games to run the business, because the mobile plan was something that I had authored and shifted the company from online games to mobile gaming. And I'd worked with a lot of BPO companies, but it was still giving what you would say giving yarn and not walking the talk. So once we even reset, so the thing is, as a banker, when you're helping an early stage company, they don't have the wherewithal and the infrastructure to give the output that's required by an investor. So you end up creating a lot of that collateral. To create that collateral, you have to get integrated, well, at least that's the way I operated, you have to get deeply integrated into the CEO's mind and the team. And you have to learn that business very quickly. And so I got very involved in the companies, and I found that was my natural instinct to get involved, and that's where the bug to actually do something on your own. And India Games was pretty much a it was going back to 2002 when I had written that business plan. By 2005-06, I'd made fast track VP at Ernst & Young, and I just felt that if I didn't make the leap now, I was 30. The longer I took, the more I would feel trapped in the status quo. If I didn't let go of the bonus and the salary and take that big leap of faith, that was the time. So call it fear of missing out in the crudest possible way, or the bug to actually do something yourself. That I think was the push to just make the leap. And that's always been the case.
So share with us a little bit about what are the attributes in you which you believe have contributed to you being successful across the spectrum of industries. You have moved from, as you said, VC, banking, gaming, media, and now it's actually, this is your own company, in other words, an entrepreneur, not just. So what has fueled your success?
So I think if it was down to one thing, I would say it would be being extremely passionate and involved with anything that I got into. Or the flip side of it, I didn't get involved in things that I wasn't passionate about, whichever way you look at it. So whether it was as a banker, there was no mandate to go and rewrite a business plan for a company and reset its trajectory because it was not doing well. Your job was to go raise money. In fact, in the case of India Games, we failed at raising money back in 2000 as an online games company. And then we flipped the whole strategy around to being a mobile games company. And then eventually that was what, led to the... So there wasn't a mandate, but there was an involvement. I have a contrarian view in business. There's this... I disagree with the philosophy of, it's business, it's nothing personal. So when you say that, and I'm sure everybody's heard it, when you just say it's business and it's nothing personal, it basically gives you a carte blanche to do something with someone that may not have been the right thing because it made business sense. Whether it means firing somebody, letting go of a client for somebody else, whether it means, it basically means you cut a corner for business gain. And it's okay. And it happens all the time. And some of the most successful CEOs are great at doing that. I don't necessarily agree with that. I believe business is personal. Business is about people, or at least the businesses that I've been involved with are all about human capital. And then by definition, business is personal. And if business is personal, you cannot live with that. Your DNA can't be, this is business, it's nothing personal. So that shift then automatically, when things become personal, it's a fine line between your judgment of, people don't like that because they think it clouds your judgment. But if you can control the emotional connect versus saying it is personal, and not cloud your judgment with too much of emotion and balance that out, but say, hey, this is about, people talk about building relationships and being personal. I think that's the crux of it. And the business that we are in right now is massively built on this foundation. The minute it becomes personal, you can't help but be passionate about it. Because you start establishing relationships with the founding team of a company, you can sort of empathize with the angst and the struggle and the strife, and you get involved. Once you're involved, you're passionate about it. It becomes your own. So if you can adopt that, so that's what happened. I would say more as a banker, because as a VC, I spent only 2 years. I got a lot more involved as a banker with the companies, and then running India Games for 7 years and none of them have been easy rides, by the way. Thank you again for saying that there was great success, but there was, I think there was there was a lot of tough times, as is the case with any startup. And we had a lot of tough times back at India Games. We had to buy back the company for my investors because our track record wasn't good, and then we built it back. So a lot of that, and it ended, in an interesting way with an exit for all of us, which was a rare exit in the Indian sort of economy, or the internet economy, so to speak. So I think that one thing to explain in a long-winded way is passion that stems from a belief that business is personal.
Very interesting. So you spoke about almost passion or obsession or madness around something which you want to do and bring your personality into business, and that has helped you to be successful. How about some of the smaller failures that you have experienced, and what are the lessons that you took from those failures? Or it could be setback or failure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, I would say. Several. So if I go back to our time at, just starting with, let's say at India Games, as a banker, I successfully closed a transaction that valued the company 3x more than the next venture capitalist term sheet. We had a strategic investor. We learned the important lesson of extracting a higher than fair price. When you extract a higher than fair price, the ask on performance is intense because obviously the buyer is paid a premium. And when you are in your infancy and early stage, it's next to impossible to actually deliver to a business plan. Now, when somebody's paid a relatively fair price, they're okay with some variances. But when somebody's paid a super premium, they feel cheated or they feel let down when this happens. So that was the first lesson. When we weren't able to sort of deliver on performance, it was an important lesson to learn that it's better long term to get fair value rather than a premium and thump your chest. At exit, when you're out and you've sold the company, that's a different thing. But when you're going to run the show, I think that was a very important lesson for us to learn. And our subsequent round actually happened at a down round. We were able to make a good thing out of that by doing a buyback for the management team. So it ended up nicely, but in the midst of all of that, we actually did, the feared down round for the company. So that was a lesson. And the second thing was the teams that we were hiring. Again, I think that the lessons there were around the core team at India Games was all, by the time we all left, was 10, 12 years old. And to keep that team together, I think we hired differently. This whole philosophy of only hiring A players, I think as a startup, and this is borrowing from, Mark Schuster, who's an LA VC at Upfront Ventures, the whole concept of hiring missionaries versus mercenaries in your company is an important distinction. So evangelists who believe in the vision and are not there to serve their own individual goals and are actually team players. And that's a lesson you learn, because sometimes you want to go with an A player, but an A player is a mercenary and not a missionary. And that can do a lot more damage to a small team than putting the company sort of on its growth path.
Samir, because one of the phrases which we use in Mphasis is we don't want to be collection of stars. Right. We want to be collective stars. Right. So I guess that's very... Exactly what we're talking about. So now, earlier we were discussing this concept of analog CEO and digital CEO, and the digital revolution which is brewing up, which is, every industry has an opportunity to transform and create greater value, or it's a threat. Right. If you were to ask, to give a recommendation to an analog CEO who is confronted with this dramatic change which is going to take place over the next 3, 5 and 10 years, and saying this digital storm is brewing or digital revolution is happening, Samir, you are a successful CEO. What should I do? Should I go and hire a chief digital officer? What must I do? What would you recommend to a friend who has asked you for an advice?
So I think for somebody wanting to make that shift, who spent many years in not looking at digital, and the irony is that you could be in the technology space but not necessarily think digital, right? And so it would be almost transformational to start thinking digital. And let's understand what that means. So for me, maybe thinking digital is there's the obvious thing. It's usually internet related. It's usually, obviously it's software related. It's tech, all of that. That's the obvious thing. But I think the more the amorphous things related to that is being able to react extremely fast, thinking more from from a far more younger perspective as to what would be consumer preferences. And not all businesses are tuned to that, but they still have to shift that. So for example, social media. A lot of social media is driven by younger people's preferences. That's just the way it is. So companies that are, older companies want to come to social media, but they don't know necessarily how to handle the backlash or the openness of that communication. So I think the first thing would be for somebody to make that transformation is to jump in with, not put their toe in the water themselves, ask other people not to put their toe in the water, but to jump right in. I saw Ronnie do this. Ronnie didn't have, the ex-CEO of UTV, did not have a Twitter account maybe 3.5 years ago. And then he took to it and sort of transformed himself into that medium. I don't think he has a Facebook page even today, but he picked a medium that was in the digital space, in the social media space, that he felt was that he could actually fit into, and then sort of, styled himself to be able to adapt to that, and then understood it really well. And I think he has close to 1 million followers today, which is hugely creditable. But you have to feed the beast. So the first thing is to get comfortable yourself. Hiring somebody in the org chart is secondary. So I would say get somebody that you trust who knows this, who's done it, and is a known, and is an established person in it. Hopefully from your peer group, and if not, hire somebody as a personal coach. And I think this philosophy of having a coach is very deeply rooted in the West. Somehow we don't tend to do it as much in India. Right. But the top CEOs in the US always talk about having their coaches that they go to. You read any big success stories, they always have a coach. And I think that coach philosophy is an important one, to bring in a coach who coaches you, and then you're able to take a far better sort of, you're able to strategize in terms of what you need to do. Because again, the digital transformation is less about the execution, it's more about the thinking of how to change a lot of, the cultural setup, your own thinking, the transparency, external communication, all of those things start coming into play in that. So, personal transformation.
Oh, very interesting. So, in your this venture, Qyuki, when you look ahead, your market segmentation is clear. You're extremely focused. Do you see disruptive trends emerging which could potentially harm? And how do you keep yourself, even though it is very new, very fresh, very modern, very contemporary, but do you see disruptive trends, and how do you keep yourself ahead of the game, or at least with the game?
So we are actually, or me personally, and as a company, we are upstarts in the entire media space. We see ourselves as a cross-platform media company.
Right.
But we're deeply rooted in digital first. So the way we look at it, we've come up with this philosophy of the inverted media pyramid. Okay? So the typical media pyramid like this is, at the base of the pyramid is the biggest segment that people talk about, that's film. Okay? Has the maximum clout, usually the biggest scale, etc. Then there's television, then there's live entertainment, and then there's digital at the top of the pyramid. It is the top of the pyramid, and so a film goes to digital, a live event might be put onto a YouTube channel, or a TV show goes to YouTube. In our case, the pyramid is reverse. So it starts with digital. The entire thought process of anything that we do from a content perspective or a format starts on digital, and then it starts, going upwards into TV or live performances, and we're also in the process of making a film, which is an international production. So in this sort of inverted media pyramid, the fact that we are outsiders in this space has helped us sort of think of this, and I think the incumbents will have a challenge to sort of completely turn around the entire thought process. So we've got maybe a thinking advantage by being the upstarts in this space. The second thing that we've done very differently, and I think that will help us sustain for a while, is all media companies lead with their brand.
Right.
We don't lead with our brand. It's the most counterintuitive thing to do in media. So if you see, we run maybe 300 channels. None of the channels actually carry our brand. Our biggest success stories, whether it, with our artists that we work with. So we are a creator-focused media company. No media company says they're necessarily creator-focused. They're content-focused. Our belief is that if we are creator-focused, the content will emanate from the creator. So by going to the content, you've actually missed one base layer. So if you're actually connected to the creator, and this is where the business being personal comes in, if you're connected to the creator and you don't lead with your brand, you fundamentally are able to build trust. There is a lot less insecurity that I'm trying to build off your success when I lead with your brand and help you promote your brand versus saying I'll promote my brand and you come onto my platform. So I believe the platform is dead. The whole thing, earlier there used to be a platform, you drive traffic to you. I believe now the platform is dead. So the content sits and goes to 20 different platforms. So it's outwards and not inwards. That was the old marketing philosophy. So we are working with creators and we leapfrog to their consumers that sit on our virtual platform. That's a collection of multiple channels. That is a virtual network. And this is a challenge that people have in accepting that why isn't it a destination? Qyuki.com is not the destination. Why should it be? Because people prefer to see it on Snapchat or YouTube or on Insta video, wherever they want to see it. They shouldn't be forced to come to another destination. As long as they can access it and as long as we are deeply connected with the creators, we will be able to win on the content formats. And that's sort of and that I think for a company that's been doing this for 20, 30 years as a media company or more is a difficult one to completely transform. It's almost the analog to digital kind of transformation in the media business.
Because literally you have turned the value chain on its head to some extent,
so to
right?
speak, yes.
And as a result, you are gaining competitive advantage. Let me now shift gear, Samir, with your permission, do a little bit of rapid fire. And I'll give you a word, whatever comes to your mind. Then you can rattle it out in a sentence or two. Competition.
Necessary evil. Without it, okay, go ahead. No, I mean, without it, I don't think the hustle wouldn't exist in a startup. Super necessary to get the hustle and get the best out of you.
Globalization.
Already happened. Thing of the past.
CEO.
Just a tag.
Brand.
Important, but not the whole end game.
Youth.
Relevant audience.
Digital.
Fabric.
Transformation.
Part of life.
Revolution.
Every day.
Success.
Will come.
Recognition.
Will happen.
Failure.
Has happened.
Fear.
Necessary to succeed.
Thank you so much, Samir. I really appreciate you taking time. I'm sure we are going to benefit with what you have shared, because your personal journey has nuggets which others can use, contextualize, and transform themselves, transform their company. Once again, congratulations on your success, and look forward to you making waves, continuing to make waves in the industry.
Thank you so much. Wish us all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.